Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome back to our Zoom Daily Live with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning, going through some real interesting material dealing with the laws of charity. And I really enjoyed Thursday's session because it broke down community involvement, especially when funds are low, and how to cope with things. So, very strategically well thought out. So, let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. So good to be with you again. We hope all is well with you there in Toronto. So we're going to turn the class over to you and let you take it from here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here, and I'm going to share the screen and come over here. This one, I believe. Yeah. So we are in chapter 9 of 10 in the laws of charity, and we just finished reading the first 3 paragraphs of this chapter, wherein Rambam introduces the idea that the community has to organize itself to look after its poor, and he identified 2 funds that they maintain. One is called Kupa, community chest. The other is called Tamachui, which is like a soup kitchen. And every community that he knew of, that he ever heard of, always had a Kupa, community chest. And that was a weekly fund that was collected every Friday just before Shabbat to distribute on for Shabbat. So to make sure that they start off the week, finish off the week, start Shabbat with a nice meal, and then have enough for till next week. And the soup kitchen, and that was assessed. It was assessed. They did an assessment depending on who you were and how you're doing, how much you have to give, and of course also how much they needed. And then there was the soup kitchen, which was collected daily. Seems from every communal kitchen, people would get together and sort of have a barbecue in every courtyard, something like that, or a common kitchen. And whatever was left over that day, they could give away. And because they didn't have refrigerators in those days anyway, so you don't want the food to go to waste, so you distribute that too. And he said that everybody had a community chest, a weekly fund. The daily, some places had, some not. Okay, so then we have some notes on that, and over here, the last note, I'm saying that Rambam clearly states that the method by which a community discharges its duty to care for the poor rests upon custom, not commandment. Because he said, some do this way, some do that way. But this refers to the method, not the duty itself. The duty he already declared as a communal obligation in paragraph 1. It was incumbent on them to do that. However, Rambam has not established any source for this communal obligation, neither biblical nor rabbinic. In other words, so I that's my note. That's me speaking. Never said in the Torah, or the rabbis never legislated that it's incumbent on the community to organize this way. It just because of the requirement, this is the best way to do it. Whereas making a difference with a court, to establish a court, there it is a mitzvah, it is an instruction for the community to establish a court. So just never got there. Okay, Sanhedrin, that's the Talmud, is the source for this. Says it has been taught a scholar should not reside in a city where the following 10 things are not found: a court of justice that imposes flagellation and decrees penalties. In other words, what it means by that is that there were various levels of court. There was a court of 3, but they could not impose. I'm getting my tongue tied up. They could not impose flagellation. They couldn't issue a punishment like that. That's the only punishment that was issued, a physical punishment. And a penalty, it was a financial penalty. In other words, not that you owe him the money, but that we're going to penalize you for what you did. So that required a higher order of justice. And a court of 3 was not enough. You have to have a court of 23. So that's what he's getting at. So you have to have at least that level court. A charity fund collected by 2 and distributed by 3, which is what was discussed. A synagogue, in other words, a a place to pray together, public baths, hygiene, public toilet, a circumciser, someone who knows how to circumcise youths, a surgeon, who's a doctor, a notary, someone who can write out legal documents, a slaughter, someone who knows how to slaughter an animal or a bird kosher, and a schoolmaster. You have to have a school, somebody who's capable of teaching the youth. So those are the 10 things that every city had to have, and a scholar should not reside in a city that did not have that. In another section of the Talmud, it says, food for the soup kitchen is collected by 3 and distributed by 3. That's the soup kitchen, since it is distributed as soon as it is collected. Food is distributed every day. The charity fund every Friday. The soup kitchen is for all who come. The charity fund for the poor of that town only. So somebody could be coming through town and is hungry, so he could go to the soup kitchen, but he's not registered for the weekly distribution. They don't have a duty to look after him. Now that I'm saying this, and I'm thinking, or reminding myself back in chapter 7, I don't know if you recall, back in chapter 7, he did discuss if poor come through from another place, how much you have to give them. You have to give them enough for food and so on. That would be on individuals. This is the community that has to look after its own poor, so that would be a different thing. That was the Talmudic sources. And the Shulchan Aruch, based on that, said, if the poor of the city are many, and the wealthy members propose that the poor go from door to door, while other members say they should not go door to door, but that their welfare be maintained through the auspices of the community according to its means, the law is with the latter. So, in other words, where there is a public discussion on how we're going to conduct ourselves, so the law goes with you have to organize and do it as a body, not leave the poor knocking on everybody's door. On the other hand, it seems that if everybody agreed that that's what we want to do, then that would be okay. On this, the Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, contemporary of the Shulchan Aruch, said, because the main obligation of charity is dependent upon the means, now there are some upon the means. So it goes according to its means. Now there are some places that customarily give according to the gift, and some according to the text, but one who gives according to his blessing becomes more worthy of blessing. And that's a teaching that's found in many places, that if you give, God is going to look after you, and you'll be blessed to be able to give more. Another section he writes, every city with a Jewish population is obligated to establish treasurers of charity who are reputable and trustworthy, and who will solicit from each a donation appropriate to his ability. They will also distribute these funds every week before Shabbos to every pauper according to his need for the week. This is called the Kupa Fund. Similarly, treasurers should be appointed to collect each day from each neighborhood bread, foodstuffs, fruits, or money from whoever has made a pledge for the day. This they distribute towards evening among the poor, giving to each according to his immediate needs. This is called Tamchui. At no time has there ever been seen or heard of a Jewish community that did not have a Kupa fund, but there are places that did not have the custom of a Tamchui fund. That's pretty well what Rambam said. And to this, the Rambam adds, accordingly, one who has food for 7 days should not take from the Kupa, while one who has his daily needs should not take from the Tamchui. You're not qualifying. You have what you need for that purpose. The treasurers must be trustworthy and wise, and they should assess the poor carefully to be sure there are no charlatans among them. If the treasurer is not trustworthy, it is forbidden to give charity through him. Don't let him operate. Okay, so that's that we started with the Rambam, when they went into a little more detail there in how the community organizes. Paragraph 4. On fast days, they should distribute the food to the poor. I think he's referring to the food that they didn't eat. on any fast day that the people eat the night before and then retire without making charitable distributions to the poor, they're considered guilty of murder. So that means that they're going to fast, and we have several days during the year when we fast from morning to evening. And so the night before, they don't need the food that they would have eaten the next day. They should be distributing it already to the poor that night. And if they didn't, they're considered guilty of murder. On them, it is written in the tradition, charity shall stay overnight, and now they are murderers. The verse in Isaiah. Under what conditions is this said? When they have not given to them the bread and the condiments that they eat with the bread, such as figs and grapes. However, if they are accustomed to put aside the money or the wheat, they are not as murderers. So, in other words, if the tradition in this place is that people just distribute the food as it is, and since I'm not going to eat tomorrow, so I'll give out the food I have. So then you should, and if you don't, then they're relying on it, they're expecting it, so it's considered like you murdered somebody. But if the tradition in the custom in that place is to put aside money or wheat, he says, because you can store it. It's not gonna doesn't go sour or rot overnight. So that kind of thing. So you can save up and distribute it in a more organized fashion. So then it's not like you murdered the guy because he knows that he's got to organize himself to wait for the 7 days. So my notes on this are, it appears that the reason one is considered guilty of murder for not having distributed prior to a fast, the food that he would otherwise have eaten, is that the poor rely on this practice for their sustenance. Therefore, where the custom was to distribute money and not food, the delay is permitted, since the money cannot be used for immediate sustenance anyway. The implication of this is that the poor did not pursue their begging on fast days, but rather joined in the community-wide activities of fasting, prayer, and study. That's what everybody did on a fast day. They were trying to get God's help, and they would not be eating, they would be praying more and studying. At the end of the day, then, they would have no food with which to break the fast, unless it had already been provided the day before, and that's why they'd be guilty of murder, because they're making them go hungry, and possibly deadly so. That's my notes. This comes from Talmud Sanhedrin, which deals with the laws of the court, how the court conducts itself. And the latter, Rabbi, was during this, we're just picking up the middle. How does he utilize the verse, and she that was full of justice? A verse, Isaiah 121, which verse did we quote before? That's the verse, but we're just quoting another part of it. Even as Rabbi Eliezer said the name of Rabbi Isaac, in that if on a fast day the distribution of alms is postponed overnight, it is just as though blood were shed, as it is written, she that was full of justice, charity, etc. This, however, applies only to bread and dates, but in the case of money, wheat, or barley, in other words, grains that you can say that will not rot, postponement does not matter. That's the Talmud, from which Rambam derived his ruling. And to this, the Shulchan Aruch wrote, on fast days, pretty much what the Rambam said, on fast days, they should distribute the food to the poor. On any fast day that the people eat and then retire without making charitable distributions to the poor, they are considered guilty of murder. Under what conditions is this said? When they have not given to them the bread and the fruits that they would have eaten. However, if they put aside the money or the wheat, they are not as murderers. Almost word for word, the Rambam. We go on to paragraph 5. He says, the kuppah is not collected except by 2 together, because it is not proper to appoint less than 2 to act as officers over the community in matters of money. However, it is permissible to entrust to a single person the funds of the kuppah. It's not that we don't trust them, it's that it's a question of how you, with what dignity and officialdom, you approach the community. It should not be distributed except by 3, for this is an instance of judgment in financial affairs, since they are giving, to or determining for each what he is lacking for the week. And so it's a financial determination. The tamchui, though, must be collected by three, since it is not an established amount. It too is distributed by three. So you always need three. That's like a court making a verdict that this is what you should get. Whereas when they're collecting, there was a prior thing that there was an assessment. Okay. My notes: the Talmudic passage requiring three for both the collection and distribution of tamchui actually states its reason as since its collection and distribution are the same. Rashi, the famous commentator, his understanding is that the collection and distribution happen at the same time. Rambam, and especially Shulchan Aruch, however, understand the phrase to mean that the collection and distribution are the same in concept, both requiring a judgment as to what amount is appropriate. Since Rambam has already defined tamchui as voluntary and not the result of a communal assessment, this must refer to the duty of the collectors to avoid receiving unduly large donations that are beyond the ability of the donor. That's the assessment that they make when they collect. So they have to know how much they ought to take. This is based on a Gemara Talmud in Bava Basra, which is dealing with torts. Our rabbis taught the charity fund is collected by two persons jointly and distributed by three. It is collected by two because any office conferring authority over the community must be filled by at least two persons. It must be distributed by three on the analogy of money cases, which are tried by a Beth Din, a court of three. Food for the soup kitchen is collected by three and distributed by three, since it's distributed as soon as it is collected. That would seem to be translated according to Rashi. The kuppah, Shulchan Aruch writes, the kuppah should not be collected with fewer than two men, because it is not proper to administer community finances with less than two. However, after the funds are collected, one can be entrusted as the treasurer over it. Similarly, two brothers can be selected as the treasurers. So it's not that, because normally, if it was a question of not trusting someone, then relatives are not allowed because they would collude. There's a suspicion of collusion. They have to be unrelated. But here, no, it's fine. As to the distribution of funds, a minimum of three is required, since it's the same as judicial settlements regarding finances, namely to examine every pauper to determine his requirements. Now, just as tamchui is distributed by three, so it is collected by three, since it is not a set amount, so it is necessary to such each donor appropriately. And just as I'm reading, I'm thinking to myself, they never talk about. He mentions Shulchan Aruch brought up the issue of relatives, and just left it at that. But he didn't mention, is there any requirement that it not be relatives among the three that distribute it? It sounds like you could have brothers, because he's talking about that it's collected and distributed at the same time. So that's the same three people. And since there could be two brothers in there, sounds like there could be three, but yet it's a financial matter, and normally on a court you wouldn't have relatives sitting in a court. So I'll have to try and ask someone with broader knowledge than my own if they can comment on that. It just occurred to me to ask that. Paragraph 6. The tamchui is collected every day, while the kuppah is collected from Sabbath Eve to Sabbath Eve. The tamchui is for all paupers, while the kuppah is only for the poor of that city. Paragraph 7. The community is allowed to transfer the kuppah funds to tamchui and tamchui funds to kuppah, where they have both. They may also change them over to any community project that they wish, even though they never stipulated this at the time the funds were collected. If there was in that jurisdiction a great sage, upon whose authority all collections were made for him to distribute to the poor, as he saw fit, then he is allowed to redirect the funds to whatever is seemly to him from among the community needs. And this is an idea that is spread across other instances of when you have a great sage. It's like a judge in the sense of a shofi, judges of days of old. They ran the community. My notes say, Rambam has already stated in paragraphs 1 and 2 the frequency with which the two funds ought to be collected. He said this about the week and the daily. Perhaps the reason why he repeats this here in paragraph 6 is to introduce the reason why the tamchui is for all applicants, while the kupa is only for poor of that city. Since the kupa is collected weekly, it can only be planned for a known population, namely the regular poor of the community. However, the tamchui, which is collected daily and may have been donated in response to an encounter with an itinerant beggar, can be used for whatever needs present themselves. So you just got to think about what's happening, how it would work out. My note B, since those who donate funds through the treasurers in various charities do not know or stipulate who will be the ultimate recipient, I will read more about this later, but this collection is done. They don't have to know who you're giving it to. So paragraph 7, which we just read, explains that they have given complete authority over the distribution of the funds to those who made the collection. Because otherwise, what are you doing with my money? So once you give it, it's gone into the community fund. Now it's the community, whoever's you set up to distribute the charity, they're the ones in charge of the money. We had, I think, something in paragraph 7 or 8 about where somebody donates a specific item that you have to honor, use it for that thing because it has its name on it. But these are fungible funds, food that is not identifiable. This is based on the Talmud in Bava Batra again. Food is distributed every day, the charity fund every Friday. The soup kitchen is for all applicants. What's that? The charity fund for the poor of the town only. The townspeople, however, are at liberty to use the soup kitchen like the charity fund and vice versa, and to apply them to whatever purposes they choose. The townspeople are also at liberty to fix weights and measures, prices and wages, and to inflict penalties for the infringement of their rules. So this little last piece of the Talmud I could have left off, but it'll be quoted by Rambam and others in another section of the law that deals with commerce. And, of course, this will be the source of it. So the Talmud was addressing everything at once, and I just kept it in. I've got this in small print because it's pretty much a repetition of the Rambam, which other parts were too, but I didn't strike them down. But over here, I wanted to keep this larger because some new information is coming out. So Ramah writes, the same applies to the officers appointed by the community. So also with an individual's gift to charity, which has been given to the officers. But if he appoints officers himself, then the community cannot change the designation of the gift because it was not given for their determination. He gave it, he said to some, you look after, you give this, you make sure it goes for this purpose in the city, so then the city can change its need. In addition, if the donor specifies that the gift should be given to the poor of the city or to a certain pauper, they cannot redirect the gift, even for the support of the study of Torah, which is considered the highest use. When a community appoints officers after which the cord becomes untied and the two become separated from one another while there are still charity funds in the hands of the officers, I'm not sure what he means by the cord becomes untied, like they're working together and now they're not. If the officers were empowered from the first, decide how to use the funds, then they retain this right. If from the first they had to subject themselves to the community, they should do that now. However, if they cannot subject themselves or are unable to reconcile with the community, then the officers should use the funds as they see fit, provided only that they use them for a matter of religious purpose. So you have this, that you empowered guys, you elected them, or you appointed them, or maybe you've even hired them, and now there's a little bit of a riff, and they feel that we should go one way, and other people say no another way, and so on. So as long as they're still in control of the funds, they seem to have the right to finish it off as within the parameters. Okay. Paragraph 8. The charity collectors are not permitted to separate from one another, other than for one to go to the gate and the other to the shop to collect. To me, this wasn't clear. We'll see the notes. But the two are sent out together. So they should, but they don't have to be Siamese twins. So they can separate somewhat. Paragraph 9 says, if a collector finds money in the street, he should not place it in his pocket, but into the charity box, and only when he reaches his home may he take it for himself. And we'll come back to this. And paragraph 10, if one collector owed his colleague money and paid him in public, the other should not place the money in his pocket, but into the charity box, and only when he reaches home may he take it for himself. In other words, the two guys, they're working together, and I remember I get, you give me $5 to pay the restaurant bill or whatever. Here's the $5 back. They're in the public, they're in the street. He shouldn't put it in his pocket, even though that's his own money. He should put it in the charity box because people see that. So we'll see. And he says the collector should not count the kupa money by twos, but by ones, to avoid suspicion, for it says, you shall be innocent before God and Israel. In other words, God knows what you're doing, so he knows you did it right, but Israel doesn't. The people don't necessarily know. So you have to look proper to them too. My notes say, as is evident from Ramah's amendment to Shulchan Aruch, which is, we haven't got there. I put this later, so maybe I should. So I've been trying something to put my notes first. That's not working out so right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them below this, at least in this instance. And go to the Talmud. Our rabbis taught the collectors of charity. You know what? Before I start this, we're running out of time. I'm going to stop here because we're not going to finish it. So we might as well. Oh no, that's not what I meant. That's not good.
Wow, Rabbi, I can see how the order in this really helped to maintain the Hebrew people during their the dispersion around the planet. I mean, they were probably setting up communities or trying to maintain their identity, but this material as a rule for their community living would have made them really shine as stellar people wherever they were, and it probably provoked a lot of other people to think in a more orderly fashion for sure, and a more caring fashion, and it's just beautiful material to make things work in a community. And I think as B'nai Noach, I mean, we're struggling to develop communities because people aren't doing these sort of things at all. It's not even, connections aren't made, but more than that, when connections are made, trying to get people to commit to doing what needs to get done, very, very, very big task. And if it's not done orderly and in integrity and honesty, it doesn't meet the community needs, and the community's not going to thrive. But
It's
beautiful material.
You're making a very important point, and I'm thinking about it. When I started, and remember, I wanted to have a prayer meeting as part of this Zoom daily to create community, at least online. The alternative is that really. The descriptions here are somewhat archaic because we have more modern conveniences today, but really a lot of the ideas are implemented into general society today. We have welfare funds and other collections. We have soup kitchens. We have all these things. What might be the best solution is for people that are for Noahides is to make sure that they get involved in these kind of activities and then apply these ideas, make sure these ideas are being kept of that in that nature, and then and point out that hey, what we're doing here has always been what the Torah suggested and what Israel, the Israel way of doing it. Israel meaning that you struggle with God, that God has given us humans situations that are needy. That's all part of the design. And so we're struggling with God's world, the way He put it up, and that's we're meant to struggle with the world and to do our share in rectifying it. And these are the guidelines. And so, if society is already implementing these guidelines, then Noahide should take front and center. They should be involved with that and recognize it and take a leadership role. And that would be the way they promote the idea that this all is according to the laws of the Torah. As a recommendation, I think you're making.
Well, that's just beautiful stuff. Well, I look forward to hearing more, but folks, we're not going to be on tomorrow night or Tuesday. We will be back Wednesday, Hashem willing. You're okay for Wednesday, Rabbi?
Wednesday is good. I have a wedding Thursday night, so I'm thinking that I'll do like I did last Thursday, where I did it from a remote site. So I'm hoping able to do that too. But for Wednesday, for sure.
Right on. Okay. So, Robbie, have you got any questions before we wind it down for the night?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, always good to have you with us as well, Robbie. I know we missed you Thursday last week, but we're glad you're here today, and hopefully we see Ronald back tomorrow. But, yeah, we're going to call it a day for our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz. Consider what he shared with us today and what you might be able to do to actually help develop in your community, wherever you are. And I think the principles that he shared today are very, 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 very useful. And you can see the well thought out manner and the real rubber meets the road mentality of getting things done and making things functional. Very, very, very well thought out. Thank you so much. So we're going to sign out for today, and we will be back on Wednesday. Till then, have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You will, everybody.